Hello ladies and gentlemen, students, thanks for making your way to ERPAC for a 5:45 start. I will get us underway so that we can get to the important part of the evening, which is the subject presentations after our speeches tonight. My name's Grace Lloyden and I'm the Dean of Learning and Teaching at the college, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our Year 9 subject selection evening. Tonight is all about supporting our young men and their families, as you begin to make important decisions about your son's senior schooling journey. While no one is expected to have it all figured out tonight, and if you came along to the Careers Expo last night, you would have heard from all of our panellists that career journeys do change. This process tonight gives us some insight into your son's goals, strengths and aspirations so that we can partner with him more intentionally in the years ahead. Before we begin, a little housekeeping from me. Toilets are located on level 5 of ERPAC through the doors on either side at the back, and additional facilities are available near the quad. In the unlikely event of an emergency, we will exit through the rear doors and gather on Gare Field. But as always, we begin by acknowledging the country on which we gather. So the St Lawrence's College community acknowledges the traditional custodians of this land, the Yagara and Turrbal peoples, who have walked and cared for this country where life has been sustained for many thousands of years, and where our spiritual ancestors travelled the dreaming pathways. We also recognise those whose ongoing effort to protect and promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures will have a lasting legacy for future elders and leaders. Let us remember we are one in land, in spirit and in community, and let us remember that this has for a long time been a place of mentoring and growth. And we'll also have a short prayer, please. So in the name of the Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Loving God, as we plan for the future, give us calm and confidence. When we feel uncertain, help us trust in ourselves and others. Give us the courage to follow the paths you've placed before us, using the gifts you've given us to serve and support others. Live Jesus in our hearts forever. In the name of the Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Amen. To formally open tonight's event, I now invite our principal, Mr. Ben Lowry.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you, everyone. Certainly not needed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Laurie's this evening and welcome to the Year 9 into 10 subject selection evening. It's great to see so many families here tonight because it's a really important milestone in your family's journey. It's your son's intentional step into Year 10, which marks the formalisation of his senior schooling. I have to begin with just, a small personal note for myself. I'm new right now. I have daughters in Year 9. Twin daughters in Year 9, so I'm working through the subject selection process, having those conversations at home that involve which science to do, what do I do if I don't get my first preferences, what are my friends doing and how can I do the subjects the same as them, or I really like that teacher and that's where I need to be. So the information that we're hoping to provide you tonight is a little bit of a strategy around how to further those conversations from the best point of view, or from a point of view that allows you to best choose subjects for your son's future in the very, very first instance. So to give you the formal introduction and understanding of where we come from a Laurie's perspective. At Laurie's we have a very intentional approach to preparing our students for success beyond Year 12. And one of the key decisions we made as a college was to ensure that Year 10 is a continuation of, not just a continuation of junior school. We want your sons to be choosing subjects now that set them up for senior school, that allow them to achieve their own personal excellence. In many other schools, students continue with general subjects as they move through into Year 10 and then formally choose their senior subjects in Year 11 and 12. By choosing them slightly earlier, by having an understanding of what those subjects are, it puts them in a better position to achieve, and if they do need to make changes along the way, which I'll discuss in a moment, then they are able to do so. As I said, here at Laurie's we select the senior style subjects in Year 9 and begin studying them in Year 10, using the same structure, content and assessment that your sons will understand when they get into the senior school. Now I want to be clear, when we choose these subjects in Year 9, they are not locked in 100%. We understand that boys align their subjects with their interests, their habits and what they're successful at, and that's great, that's a great starting place. But we also know that over time and as boys mature, those interests, those habits and those success features can sometimes change, okay, particularly at that Year 9 and 10 age. We know that 1/3 of our boys go through a subject change between Year 10 and 11. and it's a great time to do it. It's a great time to have that experience, to move it on if you need to, and formalise that study for Year 11 and 12. It certainly becomes a lot harder if you try to change subjects in Year 11 and 12, and for those, depending on your study pathway, and definitely for everyone here achieving a QCE, it can have a greater impact on your pathway to achievement and attainment in that area. So tonight is not only about understanding why to choose those subjects, understanding what subjects you want to choose, but understanding that it is setting you up for that formalised personal success. Ladies and gentlemen, the world that your young man is going to step into is a complex and constantly changing environment. The skills that they will learn will become ultra important regardless of what subjects they choose and what they ultimately and eventually do. I'd encourage you tonight to listen to the people who are going to present to you, to take on board everything they have to offer, but most importantly, choose subjects that are right for your son under good advice. And they're subjects that are interesting to them, help them achieve success, and make them want to learn. And that's probably the most important message you'll hear tonight. Thanks everyone, good luck with the process, and I'm going to hand over to Mr. Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry. Welcome, everyone. I am the Head of Teaching and Learning Senior School, Acting, so I guess a key tenet of my role is to support your boys through their journey from 10 to 12. My door is always open, so if you ever need support, please feel free to come and have a conversation, and we can work with you there. So as we begin our subject selection and set planning process, it's important to understand how the Queensland senior school system works and what qualifications students are working towards during years 10 to 12. So let's start by clarifying two key terms, the QCE and ATAR. These are related, but they are not the same thing. The Queensland Certificate of Education, or QCE, is a qualification that students receive at the end of Year 12, showing that they have met learning, literacy and numeracy requirements. The Australian Tertiary Administration's rank, or ATAR, is a rank used solely for university entrance, comparing a student's performance to other students in the state. Not every student will need an ATAR, but every student should be aiming to achieve a QCE. Last year, we had 100% QCE attainment, which is an achievement we are very proud of and motivated to continue. So how is a QCE awarded? To receive a QCE, students must achieve at least 20 credits for eligible courses of study. They must meet literacy and numeracy requirements by passing a unit in General English or Essential English, or General or Essential Maths. They must achieve a satisfactory level of achievement, which is a C or higher in most subjects, or competent in vocational courses. Credits can come from general subjects like literature, physics, business, or applied subjects like Essential English, Essential Maths, Sport and Recreation, Furnishing Skills, VET qualifications such as a Cert 2, 3 or higher. We also offer short courses and other recognised programs to receive credits, including our active volunteering, which students will undertake in Year 10. Students typically earn 1 credit per unit of study, so they can complete units 1 to 4 in a subject like biology, and pass each unit. If they pass each unit, they will receive 4 QCE points in total. That is the same with the applied subjects. Completion of VET qualifications can award up to 8 QCE credits, depending on the qualification. Now, how is ATAR calculated? So ATAR is calculated using a student's best 5 general subjects, or 4 subjects plus 1 other, which could be an applied subject or a completed certificate 3 or higher. The ATAR is used only for admissions into university courses. A student doesn't need an ATAR to complete Year 12, get their QCE, or access TAFE or trade pathways. So again, QCE is your graduation qualification, and ATAR is your university entrance rank. At Laurie's, we want every student to be on a pathway that suits their strengths, whether that's ATAR, VET, or a blend of both. And our job is to help students make well-informed choices now so that they're set up for success later. In a moment, you'll hear about the different subject combinations that can lead to either pathway. But first, I'll hand over to Mr. James McLaughlin, who will speak about the vocational education opportunities we have here at Laurie's. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James McLaughlin and I'm in charge of vocational education and training at St Lawrence's College, affectionately known as VET. So we have in senior over 700 boys involved in VET courses. So whilst you guys are only going into year 10 next year, it's part of your senior journey. It's going to multiply more and more as you go into year 11 and 12. And going into year 10 means that you will be doing a Cert 2 in active volunteering. So effectively everyone will be a VET student in year 10 moving forward. So while that entails learning a subject which will give you 4 QCE points, it also aligns beautifully with what the school stands for, with service learning and working effectively with others and people with diversity. So everyone's going to be a VET student going into year 10 next year. And if you're doing CAD, that subject also starts in year 10. So if you're going to do a Cert 3 in engineering, you're going to be a VET student in year 10 moving forward into year 11 and 12. So I think I sat with Ms Dyer from Careers Counselling the other day and we worked out we had 51% of year 12 boys are studying a Cert 3 or higher. So the VET subjects are really, really popular at Laurie's. But more than that, some of these boys, I think 25% of them use that as their ATAR and their outcomes. So boys that were actually ATAR students were relying on their VET certificates to get them into some sort of tertiary in the future. So we have great success there. But not only that, it's not aligning just with an ATAR pathway and a non-ATAR pathway. They blend beautifully together and they're respected equally. So my role at the college is to make sure boys find their pathway and the correct pathway. If we can't offer it at school, we find placements outside of school with TAFE programs or apprenticeships or work experience programs. So many things that we can do from, we've got guys doing fashion design, we've got guys doing real estate, we've got diesel fitters, we've got everything in between. So it's a wide range, and if we can't do it at school, we'll make sure we find it for you guys as you progress into senior. That's a list of the course offerings that we're actually going through as the boys move into year 11 and 12. Some of them aren't offered until year 11, so it's worth noting that some of the displays tonight with VTSA, VTSB, we call them kind of like a trade taster course. So they lead into what many of these courses end up being for your boys. So if you're doing a VTSA course, that lines up with construction, it lines up with furnishings, whereas VTSB aligns to like your fabrication, metalworks and electrotech. So Mr O'Sullivan, who's Head of Technologies, did want me to really reiterate, if you choose VTSA in year 10, being that it's only a 1-year course, and you decide you want to maybe go down the fabrication road or something totally different, that's more than fine, okay? So you don't need to make that decision right now based on your future VET courses. Because those skills are transferable across the board. You're learning your hand skills, you're learning how to use machinery, and some of those teachers are the same, whether they're in the VTSA side or VTSB side of things. So just a word of note that some of these courses, while they don't start to year 11, the year 10 trade taster style training for what you guys are going to be looking towards are trying to blend all those courses in and give you a bit of a try before you buy. We also have diplomas, we have Cert 1s, and we have everything in between too. So as these boys move into year 11 and 12, they're going to be multiplying in the different options and the different courses they can do. So next year is going to be a bit of a try a trade style, and then they can go exactly where they need to go. For example, Electrotech. Electrotech is a Cert 2 in electrotechnology. It's the official prerequisite course that will take that time off your apprenticeship for boys going into that specific trade area. So if boys are going to do VTSB, they can do VTSB, and then that will go straight into Electrotech and works nicely as the big brother course for that. TAFE at School is a really great program. It's meant for boys that can't find something that's in-house. They can go to TAFE 1 day a week. There might be 3 or 4 people from a few different schools around the area, and they can do everything that we can't offer, which I mentioned before. So we have boys doing things like rebuilding motors. We have boys doing greenskeeping. So we've got many sort of different courses offered there that boys can apply through the TAFE at School program, and they'll go to TAFE 1 day a week, and they'll study in their courses at SLC for the other 4. School-based apprenticeships and traineeships are a big part of my role. We have over 30 at the moment. I've got about 5 on my desk waiting to be signed up. So that's factoring in boys 15 years and older starting their trades. So they're signing a 4-year contract to become apprentices, and whatever time they take off from their days at work each week, they come off their apprenticeship of those 4 years. So electrical boys do 2 days a week, most other trades do 1 day a week, and we try and make sure that we factor in that day that they're missing each week. Our teachers are really proactive in helping them catch up whatever they miss out, and the boys get a study line because they're studying a Cert 3 in that trade area, so it's part of their actual study towards their QCE. It adds points towards their QCE. So we work with those trades, we work with those boys, and we work with those employers to support everyone in between. Structured work placement is offered every holidays. That will start in year 10, so every single holidays there's work placement going forward, so it's a good way to be able to find out exactly what you love, what you don't love. And I think we had about 60 boys on work placement last holidays, and I think we got about 9 school-based apprenticeship opportunities. So it's a good way to get yourself out there and possibly get an apprenticeship from something if you really love that. That's about all from me. I'll pass on to Grace again. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And my colleagues have done such a good job of sticking to time that it's actually on me now if we go over. But can I affirm the work of James and Josh in supporting the pathways of our boys? I'm sure, as many of you know, I'm new to the college this year, and I've worked at schools around Queensland, from state schools to Catholic schools to independent schools. And not only are the pathway offerings at this school outstanding, they are the best I've seen. The agility and the versatility and the support that our staff provide our boys is exceptional. So I'm going to talk to you today about actual subject selections and how that can underpin pathways. And I'm going to go off script now, and that's always a little dangerous. But on the screen I've got a graphic representation of all of the students in Queensland that are going to graduate in the year that your son graduates. Obviously there's a lot more than that. There's probably between 50 or 60,000 boys students that will graduate at the end of grade 12, but I've just represented it in the form of 100 students on the screen. And I've got some of those figures coloured yellow now and some of those figures coloured white. So I'll just give you a second, or 10 seconds to talk with your son or your partner or your family member or the person next to you about what you think those colours might represent. Just 10 or 15 seconds. And if your son's been paying attention, he should be able to tell you. Okay, so in yellow, we have all of the students in Queensland that typically graduate with an ATAR. And the students in white typically don't graduate with an ATAR. So increasingly in Queensland, less students are graduating with an ATAR, and that's because, as James said, there are a variety of pathways into university, and there are many non-ATAR pathways into university. Okay, now you've got 2 of those yellow figures that are coloured in red. So I'll just give you another 10 seconds to speculate as to what those red people might be. Pardon? Possibly. So our red people, if we look at our red person in the top left-hand corner, I really shouldn't have even coloured that whole person red. I probably just could have coloured one limb. That's the number of students in Queensland that get the top ATAR of 99.95. So very, very few students in Queensland secure that 99.95. Between 30, 31, 32 seems to be about that sweet spot. So across, all of those students that are ATAR eligible, very few get that top ATAR. And the red person in the middle is the number of students in Queensland that get an ATAR in the 30s. So students can receive an ATAR that is below a 30, but they won't be told that when they get their ATAR in their QTAC portal. Anything below a 30 is represented as 30. Alrighty, next slide. I've coloured in all those people, or half of those yellow people in red. So another 10 seconds to speculate what that might mean. And just remembering that all of the yellow people are ATAR eligible. So all of the red people represent the number of students in Queensland that get above the median ATAR. Now, we don't typically get a precise median every year, but, and you don't need to, this is not a test, but just in your mind, ask yourself what might the median ATAR be. If the top is 99.95 and the bottom is represented as 30, what do we think that median, that middle ATAR across all of those red students might be? It's an 80. So a lot of folks can assume that it's like a percentage because it's close to being out of 100, and so if you're above 50 then you're in the top half, but not so. So 50% of the ATAR eligible cohort in Queensland gets above an 80 and about 50% gets below. So what that means, if a student is getting an ATAR below 80, they're not as competitively placed for university if they're relying on that as their university entrance method. So when students are selecting their pathway and they're wondering what might be the right pathway for them, and what is a competitive ATAR, I won't say what a good or a bad ATAR is, because it's about the function of the ATAR is to get into university. So whether it's competitive or not, you want to be in that top half, obviously. Okay, I've got some green people now. What do we think the green people might represent? The green people, and I just reminded myself of Mem Fox's The Green Sheep. The green people represent the students in Queensland that get a 90 or better. So if you look at all of the students in Queensland that graduate each year, not as many students as we think get an ATAR, and very few students get an exceptionally competitive ATAR. It is difficult. All right, I've got some circles now. So the colouring of those circles is indiscriminate, seemingly. There's not a pattern for those circles. What do we think those circles might mean? So the circles represent all of the students in Queensland who went to university after they graduated. So some of our white figures there did not get an ATAR, but they got into university. How did they do that? Through a selection rank that is achieved with a VET qualification. So an ATAR is an ATAR and a selection rank is a selection rank. But what happens in the background is that a student could complete a qualification that counts as a selection rank, and universities will use whichever is higher of the two, the ATAR or the selection rank, to get into university. So all of those students with the circles around them went to university. Some of our students in the top, in the 90s didn't end up going to university. Some of our students in the top half didn't go to university. Not as many of our yellow people that were in the bottom half of the ATAR eligible cohort went to university, but a lot of our students in white did. Not just our students at Laurie's, but in Queensland. Some purple people now. What do we think the purple people might represent? The purple students are the students who entered university on a selection rank that would have been higher than an ATAR. So an ATAR is not the be-all and end-all to all students. What we advocate at Laurie's is that the best way to get into university, if that's what a student wants, is their way. It doesn't have to be through an ATAR, it doesn't have to be through a VET qualification, it could be a combined pathway. So we're calling that these days a credentials pathway, where a student might choose to graduate with an ATAR and a credential, and they might use either of the two to get into university. Some students will just choose a VET pathway to get into university, and in many cases, if you ask our careers counsellor, those students are our happy students because they're on the right pathway for them. It fits with their talents and their interests, and they've been strategic about their subject choices. So that's just a background into the way that students exit schooling in Queensland and what they might do when they finish school. What I'm going to do now is show you some data about your boys or our Year 9 cohort at Laurie's. So we surveyed all of the boys, and that can be a dangerous experience sometimes when you see your own child's feedback or representations of their life back to you. I remember when, on a separate note, I went to my son's mass at primary school once, and the priest asked everybody what they loved about their mum, and the questions and the comments just came out of the woodwork. Oh, I love that my mum helps me. They let me pour her a glass of wine at dinner, and things like that can just pour it. So I appreciate that some of the information that you might come back to, you might be like, oh dear. But what we've got here, and you don't need to. I know that the wording might be a little bit small on the screen here, but basically the question was, have you started exploring potential career options? So the blue is yes, and the red is no. So the majority of our students have started exploring. What career fields might you be interested in? Most of our boys are interested in science, technology, engineering and mathematics sorts of fields. And that would be consistent with our attendance last night at our Careers Expo. We had an engineering room and some science rooms, applied health and that sort of thing, and those were very popular. And after that we have business and finance, and then sport and recreation, because everybody wants to be a professional athlete when they're in grade 9. Alrighty, have you done any of the following to find out about future work? So the more blue there is, the more no's, and the more oranges, the more yeses. So most students haven't visited a workplace, or they haven't spoken with the careers counsellor yet, inside or outside of school. But at this stage, only about 50% of our students had completed a career profile test, but they have all done that now. Many students had researched on the internet, but very few students in grade 9 had visited a university yet. And how important are the following things in the decisions that you make about your occupation? You might be disappointed to discover that about 50% of our boys aren't that interested in your opinion about what they should do when they finish school. So I'm sorry to reveal that to you. It's also not very important at all, actually less important, as to what their friends are doing. They're not interested in what their friends are choosing. What is important to them are their grades and the subjects that they're good at. They're 50-50 on the social status of the occupation that they're interested in. Some are quite concerned about the cost of future study. What's the most important to them is the expected salary. So they all want to be rich, and they do want to make sure that there are jobs available for them when they finish school. And some questions about how ready they feel to make decisions. And I know that when you ask a teenage boy, particularly in the grade 9, they're full of confidence about the world and they know everything that they're going to do with their life, and it's all just going to be fabulous until it isn't. But the survey here probably affirms that. They know exactly, probably about 60% know exactly what they want to do when they finish school, and they know what they need to do to achieve that pathway. They're 50-50 on whether they feel ready to choose their subjects, and this was very early on, about halfway through last term. So hopefully if we were to survey them again in a couple of weeks when they are having their subject selection interviews with us, they feel more confident to choose their subjects. They are highly motivated, or they report that they're highly motivated to achieve grade 12 with high academic results. But then when we ask them about how hard they're currently working, they acknowledge that they're probably less. They're not working as hard as they could be now to achieve the results that they want to be achieving later on. I'm not sure if that resonates with any of you at home. And at the moment, what are you thinking about doing when you finish grade 12? So the blue line at the top, most of our students at this point are thinking about attending a university in Australia. Quite a few are not sure, and then the next option is pursue a professional sporting career. We do have some students who are interested in attending a university overseas, and that is an important decision for us to know early, particularly in grade 9, because some international universities require students to study certain subjects all the way through grade 9, 10, 11 and 12. So if we don't know that now that might be an option for them, then we can't give that strategic advice around that. Quite a few of our students want to undertake an apprenticeship or traineeship. Some would like to join the Defence Force. So there's quite a variety there. And I do ask them what tertiary entrance method they would like to use. So would they like to use a selection rank using a VET qualification? Would they like to use an ATAR of 65 or better? Now, I did say to you earlier that ATARs go all the way down to 30, and I haven't given that as an option. Because if a student is aiming for an ATAR, they should be aiming for at least a 65, because otherwise a selection rank is more useful. So we don't really want students getting an ATAR of lower than 65. It's just not as competitive as other methods. And then I've asked students if they would like to achieve an ATAR of 95.0 or better. And the reason why I ask that is because that is a key indicator to us as the kind of advice that we need to provide students in that particular range. That range requires specific strategic decision making. Some students are aspirational when they choose that option, and that's fine. So when I asked that question, most of our students would like to achieve an ATAR in between that 65 and 95 range. Some weren't sure, and some knew already that they wanted to use a selection rank. So I think that's really insightful that some of our students were already thinking about strategy. And so when I talk about strategies, for a long time, subject selection advice at this juncture has been choose subjects that you like and that you're good at. And that's still current, but it's not as strategic as it could be. And what we're finding is that students who use that principle for too long end up making too many changes. And so while grade 10 is a safer space to do that, when students make changes in grade 11, there are switch costs to those changes. And when I say switch costs, there are costs to the student because they miss out on foundational learning, and the continuity of learning is important, and it's valued by the QCE in the way that credits are accrued, and it's valued by good achievement in grade 12 because the subject matter in the syllabuses are cumulative. So what we find is that students need to be more strategic about that. So this year we've introduced the concept of subject selection strategies. So not necessarily just what you like and what you're good at, but the question now is what strategy are you going to use to start making decisions around your subjects. So on the screen, I've got a snip of one of the pages towards the back of the subject selection handbook. So if you missed one of these when you came downstairs, they are out on the tables up in the foyer there. And if you go to not quite the back page, but inside, you'll see a blown up version of that subject selection strategy. And I've got still a few more minutes, so I'll just quickly run through these. There's no one better strategy than any other. They're all good. It's what works for your son, what your son values, and what your son's strengths are. So some students and some families and some curricula internationally really value an interdisciplinary approach. So schools that offer the IB, for example, you don't really get to specialise in a set of subjects. You choose subjects from across the disciplines. So we've got an interdisciplinary pathway there for students who might want to try a bit of everything and use range as their strategy. We've got a health strategy there. We've got a creative strategy, an IT, a STEM strategy. If your son's thinking that he might like to end up into the sciences, then there's a technology, engineering or maths, then there's some pathways there. There's the ATAR distinction pathway, and that's the label that we've given to the pathway where students they tell us that they would like to achieve an ATAR of 95.0 or better. That's an ATAR distinction pathway. And so the advice in that category is quite specific. Students may follow that pattern of choosing subjects even if they don't want to get an ATAR of 95.0 or better. But if they do want to get a 95.0 or better, that is the advice as it currently stands, bearing in mind, and I'm sure you can appreciate this if you've got older students, we need to use a fair bit of probabilistic thinking to provide that advice. When your son graduates, in 3-4 years' time, the scaling situation and things might look a bit different, but as of today, this is the most strategic and insightful advice that we can give you. We have an entrepreneurial strategy there for students who just want to get rich. And then we have the credentials subject selection strategy there. I'm the Dean of Learning and Teaching, and academics is my jam. It's not necessarily my own son's jam, and he'll be on a credentials subject selection strategy. That'll be the right one for him. You can't choose it, can you? I did have some fun with ChatGPT and came up with some characters because I'm an English teacher, and I sort of came up with these characters to go with all of these subject selection strategies. But I won't, when I showed this to the boys, this was the most interesting thing about the PowerPoint, I've got to say. So they were interested in my interdisciplinary Ian, my creative Callum, my STEM Sam, my credentials Corey, my entrepreneurial Eli, health Hayden, IT Isaac, the ATAR distinction Aiden. But all of that information is captured in these books without the pictures, I'm afraid. But I would like to spend a couple of minutes just clarifying some questions that are commonly asked at evenings such as tonight. And the first one is around which English should my son take? So the question to ask there is, does my son want to go to university? If your son would like to go to university or is considering that as an option, then he should choose a general English subject, not essential English. And that's because universities in Australia expect a general English. So a general subject is one that has an external assessment. We offer all of the English subjects at Laurie's. So we offer English, literature, and English as an additional language. And we also offer English and literature extension in grade 12. If your son knows right now that he does not want to go into university and English is not his strength, then he could choose essential English, and he could also choose English. Maths is probably the space where we absorb the most subject changes. And for good reason. It is good that students are aspirational, but we do find that this is probably the area where we get the most angst for students and whether they're in the right maths. And I think what's important to keep in mind is that maths results at the end of grade 12 tend not to vary that much from NAPLAN numeracy results and English maths subjects results. So you will have received an email letting you know that the NAPLAN results are available on the parent portal, so you can have a look at your son's NAPLAN results. If your son's numeracy result is not right up the top, specialist maths is not for him. It's a very elite level of maths that's not required very often at all by universities. If a student is strong in maths on NAPLAN, but they're low strong, even though the word strong is there, we see that mathematical methods is also not necessarily a great fit. They want to be strong for mathematical methods to be a good fit. So if they're in that low B or C kind of range, general maths is probably the space to go, unless they absolutely need math methods as a prerequisite into university. Some universities are more fussy than others, so UQ is pretty fussy around its prerequisites, and if you're looking into particular degrees in sort of finance and engineering, it will ask for math methods. But other than that, it's not necessarily required. So if your son is not choosing the ATAR distinction pathway and his numeracy results in NAPLAN and his math subjects results are not strong, I think it's really important to be realistic about what's a good fit. And then if he's a low C or a D or an E, then essential mathematics could be a really good option for him. And I would encourage you to speak with Mr. Litchfield or your son's maths teacher about what might be the best recommendation. When you meet with one of our set planners online for a subject selection interview in a couple of weeks, we will provide you with a recommendation as to what maths we think would be a good fit for your son. And that advice that we give, we do so with sensitivity. So, if we do suggest that math methods is not a great fit, it's because we really care about your son and we want to see him thrive in his pathway. Science, many university degrees will ask for perhaps physics or chemistry, so it is important to know what university prerequisites might be required. So if a student is interested in going to university, they should really check those prerequisites for science. And then religion, would I like to study a QCE religion, as in will it count to my QCE, will it give me credits? Yes. Do I want to do an external assessment or not? And that will tell me whether I want to do study of religion or religion and ethics. I'm going to just make a point now about scaling. It's a question that comes up all the time. And our advice is going to be very straightforward. If your son would like to get an ATAR that is competitive, they should choose a subject selection strategy that makes them ATAR eligible, and they should get Bs or better. It doesn't matter which subjects they are. If your student wants to get an ATAR and they're getting Cs, it's not going to be competitive. If a student wants to achieve an ATAR of 95 or better, that's when the scaling is relevant, and we give advice about that. But if your son says to you, I want to make sure that I get an ATAR, I want to get an ATAR in the 80s, I'd like to go into this degree at university, and I should choose economics because it scales better than Chinese, or whatever the example might be, that's not the reason to choose that subject, because some subjects scale favourably until they don't. And there's a tipping point where subjects scale well, and there's a tipping point when they scale down. So it's just not helpful to think about scaling in that way. The only thing you need to know is if you want to get an ATAR, choose a good strategy that suits your son and get Bs or better. And if you want to get an ATAR of 95.0 or better, that's when it's relevant. And if you ask any teacher or any head of faculty tonight about scaling, that will be the answer. And if you want more specific advice about scaling, that's when you can ask that at the subject selection interview. So, we're on time. Now we get into the more exciting part of the evening when you can go into the subject displays and you can ask questions of the heads of faculty and the specialist teachers in those areas. So you might want to take a photo of the map that's on the screen. Otherwise, there are maps upstairs and outside to guide you. We will have bells that ring to let you know when to move into the next room. But if you would like to make your way to the first subject area that you'd like to visit and ask any questions that you would like, please do so. Myself, James and Josh will be in the quad to answer any questions that you might have as well. So thank you very much for coming this evening, and we look forward to working with you and your son as he progresses through this next phase of learning. Have a lovely evening.